I am standing on the mass grave of 501 Christians, majority of whom are women and children that were slaughtered, literally slaughtered with swords and machetes. Some of them burned alive in their homes, and some of them who were babies smashed on the wall, smashed on the ground with their brains spilled out completely, all for their faith in Jesus. The victims of the March 7th, 2010 attack in the village of Dogonahawa, located on the western edge of Jos, the capital of Plateau State in central Nigeria, are presently beneath my feet, right? So you can just pan the camera just to the ground and a tiny bit, and you can pull out. They are all here, and you can see how large this space is, right? So they were all impoverished villagers, some of whom could barely afford to feed in a day. And so many of the survivors, very few actually, could not afford befitting or exclusive burials for their family members. And therefore, they were all lumped up, thrown upon one another in this mass grave that was dug several feet deep. It was probably more than 10 feet just to be able to accommodate the population that's had been slaughtered and needed to be buried in it. And you can see how large this is. I estimate that this would be about probably 40 by 30 feet. I believe. No, it should definitely be more. From my left to my right would probably be short of 50 feet just by probably a few inches. And to the end there where you have that monument, the tombstone, that should be about 100 feet. So we're looking at a space of close to 50 by 100 feet, all containing skulls, skeletons, bodies, charred bone fragments of Christians that were slaughtered in one night by terrorists whom residents tell us were shouting Allahu Akbar and speaking the Fulani dialect while slaughtering innocent babies, slitting the bellies of pregnant women, pulling out their fetuses, pulling out their unborn babies and smashing them on the ground. Right here, I had the opportunity to meet with the pastor in charge of the Church of Christ in Nation in this community, and he has shared with us what the experience was like. And his video is contained in his interview is contained in the next video, and you can look that out. But I just thought that it is just important to highlight the gravity, the depth of the genocide against Christians that has persisted for more than 2 decades. We're looking at between 2 to 3 decades. And opponents of this anti-genocide campaign, including Muslim politicians, Christian politicians who are complicit and turning a blind eye, and even church leaders who are complicit and turning a blind eye, claim that the perpetrators of this genocide are mere terrorists who do not spare Muslims. But the question is, there were Muslims in this community within the years leading to this attack. But in the weeks leading to the attack, residents tell us that the Muslims, including members of the Hausa and Fulani ethnicities, who had previously settled here for tin mining activities evacuated the town. And because the Christians were peaceful people, they were living, they were unsuspecting, they were not anticipating any invasions, they did not care to ask questions. Of course, they hadn't involved or engaged in any clashes as the opponents or the genocide deniers are claiming. So they didn't anticipate any invasions or any attacks against, on them. But on the nights of March the 7th, 2010, this community was swarmed by hundreds of Allahu Akbar shouting terrorists who left death and destruction in their trail. At that time, I was a young reporter working with a government newspaper in the state of Benue, deployed to Plateau State as a correspondent. I had just commenced my practice as a journalist in 2008, and I didn't have so much experience covering wars, but I witnessed at least 2 major incidents and reported on them. The mass slaughter of Christians on between the 26th and 28th of November 2008, following county elections that did not favor those that claim to be the owners of the state, the owners of the country, who decided to take laws into their hands by slaughtering Christians in protest to the results of the local government elections that didn't favor them. And later on January the 19th, when another group of extremists, Muslim extremists, started riots after during a church service. They started by interrupting a church service in the northern part of Jos, and when the leaders of the church attempted to appeal to them to desist from their acts, which included making unnecessary provocative utterances, and even playing football, soccer in front of the churchyard while church service was ongoing, they decided to take up arms and go after Christians. I witnessed that, and I reported on that. I reported on, of course, the Dogonahawa massacres. But at the time, I could not afford a camera phone. I could not afford a decent camera. And so all I did was to interview town leaders and church leaders and survivors without having to come here to document the aftermath of this 4-hour-long slaughter that happened under the watchful eyes of the Nigerian army, who residents tell us never showed up until the slaughter, the massacres were complete and the terrorists had left. So I witnessed and reported on that. My colleagues who managed to come here and document these massacres, the aftermath, the evidences of these slaughters, religiously follow these massacres from 2001, including the brutal slaughter of more than 1,000 Christians from September 7, 2001 up to September 11, 2001, which saw the capture of a prominent Christian town 35 miles southwest of Jos, at the time known as Rankum, Rankum, located in the Riyom County or local government in Nigeria. For the sake of those who care to know, that town was captured after all the residents were slaughtered and the survivors displaced. And today it has remained, to this day, it has remained a no-go zone for Christians and a staging ground for further attacks and village takeovers. As of today, there are more than 200 Christian towns that have been seized and turned to Muslim no-go zones, with residents and survivors or witnesses telling us that the terrorists who led the assaults, led the attacks, emerged from Mahanga and the surrounding areas. But again, the Nigerian government knows about all of this, but it will not take action. Just as it will not want you, who is watching this, to know about the slaughters and the massacres of Christians, including the brutal slaughter of 501 identified, underline the word identified, the 501 victims of this attack that are underneath my feet right here in this mass grave are only those who were identified. There were many of them who could not be buried because they were burned to ashes. And so right here, we have just one of thousands of evidences of the genocide against Christians in Nigeria, Africa's largest country by population and also economy. Now imagine that these terrorists succeed, which is obviously their goal, in taking over Nigeria. Already they are pushing southward to the oil-rich region, the oil-rich south of Nigeria. They started from the northeast and they've been pushing all the way to the northwest, pushing now, concentrating in the north central, which is the middle belt region. And because in the northwest, the majority of the Christians have been displaced and slaughtered and displaced, they are exclusively the ones in there, and their differences are beginning to manifest. The Shias, the Sunnis are all beginning to turn their weapons against themselves. It's typical of radical Islamic countries. We've seen this in Afghanistan. We've seen it even recently in Gaza. After Israel withdrew from Gaza, we've seen Hamas terrorists slaughtering innocent Palestinians, fellow Muslims. It's the same thing that is happening now that genocide deniers are claiming is just acts of terrorism. But they are, and they were, and they still are united in the common goal of eradicating Christians from the world's largest black nation. The only places where you have other motivations for these attacks, especially those in Muslim communities, are places that they have seized and they are now beginning to practice and manifest their differences. You have in places, for instance, in a place like Damari, Benungwari local government of or county of Kaduna State, you have the so-called bandit gangs dwelling with Ansaru terrorists who are allied to Al-Qaeda, battling for the control of that region. But the goal is to institute Islam, radical Islam. In the Middle Belt region, it is exclusively an anti-Christian genocide. There is no single Muslim in this mass grave. There is no Muslim, single atheist or traditional idol worshipper in this mass grave. They're all Christians. And they are pushing to the south, pushing southward to the oil-rich region of Nigeria. Imagine what they can do if they succeed in taking the whole of the country, which is obviously their goal. Imagine what will happen to the rest of Africa and the rest of the world if Nigeria, with all of its vast mineral resources, falls to the control of radical Islam. Think about this.